Good evening, everyone. While we wait on having a quorum, we do have some audience members that are here. We did get information, so I'm going to open up the floor for public comment to get started. So we are using our time most expeditiously. If you would like to speak on public comment, you can come on up to the microphone. Let me turn this time down. 7 minutes is very generous. I don't know what meeting that was. So we're going to go on to 3. Okay. And if you could just state your name, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you so much, Councilman. I'm honored to be here with a lot of you all nice people that we have watched get elected in office. And to say, I'm here on the behalf of asking you all as the Charter Commission to please try to put in, since nobody else, put in that our clerk office start running for those seats. Those seats are very important instead of just being appointed. Let the voters have something to say about who's running our clerk's office. And I'm very much adamant because, see, I'm willing to get on the ground and bring it to go out and get voters to sign a petition for it. Because if every other city can vote for who and make them run, Pontiac should get in the mix too. We should have what to say and who's sitting in that office. And to say, I thank you all.
All right.
Good evening. My name is Rick David. I live at 28 Franklin Boulevard in Pontiac. Came here in '97 as head of the United Way of Oakland County, and I have a bed and breakfast, and I'm in chair of the Historic Commission and a lot of things like that. Let me just kind of give you, this is a really important committee that you're in, and you may remember that Hubert and I got the one some years ago going again, and I'm happy that you're doing it now. So when I look at Pontiac, it was founded in 1818. In the Civil War in 1861, it became incorporated. If you go downtown and look, the big bank building, 1 year before the Great Depression, that was built. The year I was born, and I'm an old guy, in 1946, Pontiac had 76% of all retail business in Oakland County. Think about that. You just have to do this. Then, of course, we had the issue of state control. And what Rick David sees is that after the state control, a new city was born. The other city, that's history. A new city started the year that the last individual of the three, left. So it's so important to do this in what you're doing. I've given you the Federal Reserve out of Chicago selected 2 cities in each state in 2012 to look at, and they selected Pontiac and Grand Rapids in our state. And there were 4 categories, and you can look at those, and I have those for you, that had to do with resurgence, transformational, fading, and overwhelmed. We were at the bottom with Gary, Indiana. We were in the bottom, and you just have this information. If I was in this committee's role, I would reach out to the Federal Reserve and say, can you update where we're at now? You did this 10 years ago. Where is Pontiac now in terms of where we need to be? And I've listed 4 things that they saw that it was important for you to consider to be more a vital city, to become from overwhelmed, which we still are. I'm hoping in the next 4 or 6 years we get to be a C. I don't expect to be an A right away. It's going to take a while to get to where we need to be. You have such an important role. So I would do that. And then the final thing I would say, I know that there's some thoughts about having a city manager. Remember, this personality issue of Pontiac. They are not a welcoming city to new people. They are not a welcoming city to new people. I would say that if you had an individual in that role, he or she would be gone in 5 years because they were not part of this community. And that is just my point of view. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Mr. David and Veronica Taylor. I'm going to go to closing comments, and then my hopes is by the time closing comments are finished, we would have a quorum. So I'll start with Commissioner Ybarra.
Thank you to the public for coming up to the podium and expressing your opinions as to how we should shape the city of Pontiac. As I've only been on this earth for 23 years, I do appreciate the experience that our community brings into seeing the different perspectives of what Pontiac was and what Pontiac can be. And I guess I'm only have tunnel vision for seeing the future. So to get that explanation of how the community was back then, and I do appreciate Mr. David's comment as to saying that, you know, Pontiac was a different city back then, and after some big changes, Pontiac's a new city. And with the new city is a clean slate, and with the clean slate is a new way to shape the image of what Pontiac can be in the future. So I do appreciate the public continuing to come on out and expressing what they would like to see in the charter, and hopefully we can execute the most important things that of reshaping our Pontiac into a new image. Thank you.
Commissioner Burrows.
I'd just like to say I do thank you, the both of you, for coming in tonight. I've been around for a while here in Pontiac, born and raised, and I do get what Mr. David was saying and how Pontiac used to be. But I do think we have a chance now to make it great again. So I am looking forward to more input from the community, just as yourselves here. I'm looking for more people to come with their input, and hopefully we can get this done and before the 3 years, hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Garrett.
Good evening. I share some of the same sentiments from my colleagues, and also Mr. David and the public comments that I've heard. I've been a part of this community going on my 26th year. And I started out as a worker in the community. And so my vision or my perspective would be a little different than those who have probably been in leadership a lot longer before I transitioned over into political office. One of the reasons for transitioning into political office is because of some of the decisions that were being made because of lack of leadership. And when you're coming out of a transition as we had, where you had someone come in and dismantle you with no regard for the people, you know, it's a little difficult to really trust, if that makes sense. And so any community or other communities in Oakland County, they all have their own unique individual footprint of who they are. And so that makes no difference. You know, that difference in Pontiac should have that same respect. I don't think because you're no longer have industrial folks in your city meaning that you don't have a say-so in industrial organizations or businesses that come in. I do share the perspective of there was a new identity in Pontiac, and we should look at other resources that took the time to try to figure out who we were then, and if they have that same knowledge or expertise, that we should look at them again and say, okay, what is your ideal or what is your perspective? But then to Commissioner Burrow's point, the community itself. And so a lot of times I spend a lot of times in the community, in the neighborhoods. There's some of the same people who are still living when we were that industrial town, whom now their children have taken over the home or responsibilities of that particular family. And then there's some different identities that's starting to form and take place as the community itself. UWM, for example. And so by that being, I think Michigan's now largest broker as far as the housing industry is concerned, that's just one industry, right? But you have Williams International, you have some other places, who kind of bark along or mark themselves as an industrial company. So with that being said, I'm looking forward to more community discussion, more input from our those who have been here through the process, right, to kind of help guide that. I will continue to go in the community and look at and have conversations around what is the best fit for Pontiac. I wouldn't necessarily say Pontiac is not friendly to newcomers, but they're definitely not, as any community would be, not friendly to individuals who don't consider Pontiac people or their thoughts. And so,
Thank you, Commissioner.
Are you not letting me talk? No, go ahead. No, sorry.
Yeah. No, I'll let you go a couple, 2 minutes, and then we also had a quorum.
Oh, y'all gonna put me on the clock?
I put everybody on the clock.
I'm about to be the Eric Mays of the
clock
commission.
was there, so that is great. So I have the illustrious duty of being the chair of this meeting today. So we're going to call to order at 6:23 the 12th session of the Charter Commission. At 6:24, roll call, Madam Clerk.
Commissioner Burrows. Garrett.
Present.
Killian. Payne. Ramsey. Stewart. Turpin. Williams.
Present.
Ibarra.
Present.
Vice Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. That's music to my ears. I need a motion to excuse Commissioner Payne, Chairwoman Ramsey, Commissioner Stewart, and Commissioner Turpin.
Moved by Garrett.
Support.
All right. Any discussion? Okay. Seeing none, roll call.
Commissioner Garrett.
Yes.
Killian. Yes. Williams.
Yes.
Ibarra.
Yes.
Burrows.
Yes.
5-0.
Okay. Awesome. Which brings us to amendments to the agenda. Are there any amendments to the agenda? Mr. Ybarra?
We did receive some information from Ms. Tiffany Tilley, who I would like to amend onto the discussion just to get a brief explanation of what she has provided for us today and to maybe go into detail, maybe do some back and forth on that, if you will.
Okay. Is it just a support?
Support by Garrett.
Okay, it's been moved and supported to amend the agenda to add the communication from Ms. Tilley to the discussion. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, roll call.
Commissioner Killian.
Yes.
Williams.
Yes.
Ibarra.
Yes.
Burrows.
Yes.
Garrett.
Yes.
5 yeas, no nays.
Okay, now I need a motion. Is there any other amendments to the agenda first? Okay. Seeing none, I need a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Moved by Garrett.
Second.
Any discussion? All right, seeing none, can we get a roll call on approving the agenda as amended?
Commissioner Williams,
Yes.
Ibarra,
Yes.
Burrows,
Yes.
Garrett,
Yes.
Killian.
Yes.
5 yeas, no nays.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk, which brings us to item number 5, which is the approval of the minutes from last meeting. Is there a move to approve the minutes?
So moved by Killian.
Support.
All right, any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, roll call?
Commissioner Williams,
Yes.
Ibarra,
Yes.
Burrows,
Yes.
Garrett,
Yes.
Killian.
Yes.
5 yeas, no nays.
Okay, minutes approved, which brings us to item number 6, which is subcommittee reports. Did we have any subcommittees that met since last month? Okay, seeing none, I will take a point of privilege to bring up the conversation I had with the chair before this meeting. Several of the commissioners have expressed that they needed additional training in order to move forward with their role as a charter commissioner. We are going to move the schedule of that training to the Personnel Committee, Commissioner Garrett, so we can be responsible for setting up those trainings for them. I'm thinking we can go through the MML, and then we also have to get with the city clerk to find out if we have to pay for some additional trainings, what that would cost, and then bring that back to the body of the whole. But if the training is free from MML or some other groups, we can just bring them in and schedule those meetings. So I think the meetings would be separated, so we wouldn't have to either call a special meeting or have a quorum. So that's the thing that I'm thinking of, because I think that's primary in moving some of these things forward.
Okay, I can support that. Yarborough, I'm sorry, Chair.
Yeah,
Through
go
the chair,
ahead.
through the
Yep.
chair.
Vice Chair Williams, if I may, I just wanted to inform the community prior to our meeting, I assume prior or the previous commission meeting we had, it looks like Commissioner Killian did do a report for the outreach committee last month, in which it was explained that we have reached out to Mary Charles of the Michigan Municipal League. We reached out to her in which she is aware of the Pontiac Charter Commission requesting training, and that they were going to get back to us after the Capcom event that they were a part of, to which I have no answer back from them. I did do a conversation back around, sent out an email again. Councilman Goodman did explain that our deputy mayor, Calfani Stevens, was recently elected to the Michigan Municipal League, so maybe reaching out to Deputy Mayor Stevens, which once again, congratulations on that position. But just wanted to give you that update on that as we transfer from outreach to personnel.
Awesome. So I will follow up with you, Commissioner, on what that communication, and maybe if you can even CC me, then I can follow up with the lady from the Michigan Municipal League. I will also come up to the mayor's office either tomorrow or Friday and find out if there's any additional help they can provide. But I think there's 3 or 4 other groups that do similar trainings that we can at least bring in. And my thought process is we might want to also contact someone who just had a charter approved and find out what steps they have come up with in order to do that. But I just wanted to bring that to the floor at a public meeting so people know that we are trying adamantly to schedule those trainings as we move forward. Which brings us to item number 7. We have some communication for Ms. Tiffany Tilley. I do want to take a moment for her to introduce herself to the citizens of Pontiac before we start the discussion, and her role in the clerk's office, so we can have a framework to work from.
Good evening. Again, my name is Tiffany Tilley. I am the Chief Assistant Clerk for the City of Pontiac. I first want to start by saying thank you all for serving in this capacity. This is a very important role, and as I stated in the email that I sent out to the chair and vice chair, this is essentially Pontiac's Bible. And so it does need to be updated, and we definitely want to help and support your work here at the clerk's office. So we came up with a schedule to help you because you will have 3 opportunities to get your changes on the ballot. Next year, during the presidential primary in January, the primary in August, and the general election in November. And you probably, with this schedule, you probably will not be able to make the January, well, you will not be able to make the January date. But that will give you an opportunity to get it on the August primary on the ballot. And then if you need another opportunity to get it on the ballot in November. We are suggesting that governance items be placed on the ballot separately as opposed to one. In case you have any issues with any of those governance items. Some things may get passed, some things may not get passed for the governance items. So that will increase your opportunities to get things passed.
So can you explain what governance items would be?
So I know for an example, one of the items I've heard is about the mayor.
Strong mayor.
Which form of
mayor
government
form,
you
which
would have for the mayor. So that would be a governance issue.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Tilley, so when you say separating the governance items, should we, with only so many elections for the proposals to be on a ballot, are we trying to, is there some sort of cap that you want us to, or at least advise us to look into, like maybe only having 3 governance items compared to having all 8 on one, and
At this time, I don't have a suggestion for a cap. I think that would be a question to ask when you go through your training, what they suggest.
Okay. Anybody else have a question?
But everything would go on the same ballot. So it would not be split. It would be the primary or the general. If, say for instance, you put something on the primary ballot and it did not pass, you may be able to bring it back during the general with some changes to it. So the suggestion is to try to stick to the schedule as much as possible so that you have that opportunity.
okay, I like that.
Commissioner Killian?
I'm good.
All right. Commissioner Burrows? All right, Commissioner Garrett.
So, Ms. Tilley, is the clerk office aware that we have up to 3 years to pass this charter?
So not from the date that you were elected, but from the date that was on the ballot. So when the citizens decided that there would be when that was on the ballot, that, yes. So it's from that date, not from the date that you were elected or chosen.
So was that date,
Is that November date?
so is that the November date?
I don't remember, I don't know the date.
Okay.
I would have to ask the clerk.
No, that's what I'm saying, like, because that would determine.
I know when I spoke with the clerk, he said it was the date that it was on the ballot, not when you were on the ballot.
So we were on the ballot in May. So the charter amendment itself was on the ballot in May because I was still in office when that became, and I wasn't eligible to run for charter until after I left office. So then, we got voted in November.
Okay,
We took office in January.
okay.
But we need to get, I guess, a legal reference on when does the Charter Commission actually start? Because I don't know how you can be dated from a time in which you could not have acted. So what I'm saying is, even though the charter amendment was made in May,
Right.
until you actually take office and have officers sworn in, then how do you actually have a date? So I think that part needs to be clarified because that changes the timeline. If it's from the date that the voters approved to have a charter commission, and that makes 3 years, then that gives us basically 2.5 years versus 3 years of actually going through. If it goes from the date that the charter commission actually was sworn in and took office, eligible to go, then that makes it a longer time period. So we need to have the city attorney actually find out what the state law is. And what I will do, because now we're at a meeting with the quorum, I can pose that question to the clerk to get us something in writing that says what the actual date is, because I think that may be either a legal issue from there, or there may be some state law that we need to see where that amendment says that the charter starts from X date. So that's some research that I can do and have for a FYI for next meeting, because that determines the timeline part. Go ahead with your next question.
Okay, and I said that to say, because this gives us, this looks like about a year, this timeline that you set out for us. And I do, I'm not opposed to having for example, since we're talking about governance, if you have several opportunities to get hot topic items, for it to have a separate decision, because it just seems like it's a better approach than just saying that if you put it all together and it fails, then, and you run out of time, then you have to go back through this process all over again. Versus if it comes out that the governance part is a hot topic item, then you have opportunities to go back and correct, or as Ms. Tilley stated, make changes to it. So I'm not opposed to that. I just wanted to know the timeline, though, because that would determine how much conversation we can have and so forth and so forth. So I think these various, how is laid out from the email, gives us time to discuss each article, but then again, get a good feedback on the community and this dais as it relates to certain items inside of the charter that you may want to put on the ballot so you have less work in the end. That's it.
Okay. Anybody else got questions for Ms. Tilley? So I do have just a couple of questions. So in a scenario in which the form of government may be a primary question, for example, right? It seems to me that determines how much time you spend on other articles. If the general consensus of the body is to stick with, let's say, strong mayor form of government, right? Then we have a current charter that kind of has that framework. But if the city says we want to go in a different direction, then that changes the amount of work and framework that you would even be starting with as we go through these articles, because those articles would not apply, because the same powers would not be invested in the mayor and the council, right? The way we look at mayor and council is based on the current strong mayor form of government. And so just from a perspective, I don't know what governance items trigger other governance items, is what I'm saying. Like what you said, Ms. Tilley, was the first opportunity following this timeline would be to put some major items on in August, so then you would have a second look at it in November. What I'm saying is the work of the charter would be different in general if we automatically decide we want to stay with strongman form of government, and that's not an issue, or that's an issue that needs to go to the voters maybe in February of this year versus waiting until August, because the work we do between February and the deadline, which probably would be like July something, for the August election would be different.
So according to the conversation I had with the clerk, everything would need to be on the ballot at one time. You cannot break it up into different dates. It all has to go on one ballot, one date. And then if it fails, or some items fail, then you can make changes and then bring it back for another date. Now, you can use all three dates to do that, but at the pace that you're going and the time that you would need, you probably will not be able to make that first presidential primary election date.
What I'm saying to you, Ms. Tilley, is if the major form of focus of the government is at question or not at question, then it determines the pace in which you move to change the other things. What I'm saying to you is if, for example, the group of 9 decide that city manager form of government is the way to go, and that goes out to the voters and it goes down handily, and 90% of the population says we don't want city manager as form of government, it doesn't make sense to then bring that issue back to the people. What I'm saying is because it's so controversial, waiting until, I guess, the whole package is together may not be advantageous to finding out the scope.
I absolutely understand what you're saying. However, when we had the conversation, the clerk and I, he said that that would not be a possibility if the commission wanted to do something like that. It cannot be broken up in that way. You cannot put that governance item on in the presidential primary without the rest of the changes.
Because the way, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
The way that it was, as it's written and explained, is if that we could take, like it says right here, governance items may be placed on the ballot as a separate question. So it can't be placed as a separate question. The whole charter has to be placed in November. And then if it's failed because it has, let's just say as a city clerk, not city clerk, I'm sorry, city manager on there, then the whole article, then it has to go back.
So all of your all of your amendments
Okay.
to the charter will go on one of the ballots. You can have governance items separate on that same ballot. What you cannot do, from the conversation I had with him, what you cannot do is put on a governance item and then come back and put on additional changes that were not initially on that ballot. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, but you're saying, I understand what you're saying, but you're saying, it sounds like you're saying two things though. Like the governance if we just take governance off the charter, right? And we say, okay, let's just use August and November. And we say on August, we're going to put the governance item, should we have city manager or should we have strong form mayor government? And not the rest of the charter. Is that what you're saying? That's allowable? That's allowable?
That's not allowable.
Okay.
So let me say it like this.
Okay.
Say the charter amendments that you all come up with
Yes.
is item A. And then say you want to have 2 governance items, and that's item B and item C. You can do that on one ballot.
In August, right? Just say with August.
You could do that in August.
Right.
And then say item B fails, and you decide you want to make changes to item B and and item A and item C passed, but item B failed.
Okay.
So then you can try to bring item B back with changes on the November ballot. So that would give you an opportunity to have it on second. But what you cannot do is put item A on in the presidential primary, item B on in the primary in August, and then item C on the general.
Okay.
You understand what I'm saying?
We're saying the same thing. Okay.
Well, so
Sounds like-
I think for clarity, there needs to be a package with each governance item. So, for example, as a body, if we were looking at a governance question, so let's say we would come up with a charter that had 50 pages in it. We agree with 40 of those pages with no changes. There was 10 pages that needed to be changed, and we put those amendments, and that included strong mayor. That would be a set of proposals that we needed to put all on the same ballot. At the same time, I guess we would also have to put and this is where education is going to have to be so important. Mm-hmm. We would also have to put B ballot on the slate, which would have city manager form of government, the 10 pages we wanted to change, and the rest of the charter, all in one section at the same time in order for the scenario that you're creating to work for us. You get what I'm saying?
On the same ballot, yes.
So that's a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot.
That is a lot to try to get to citizens. So I guess we're going to have to find a way as a group, and I wish the rest of my commissioners was here to hear this part. So hopefully they'll watch it and we'll have conversation about it because I don't want to belabor the point tonight. But I think we need to have a conversation, I guess, about how, and this is probably outreach, as we start going through these things, making sure that we are getting a good pulse of the people, because it just doesn't make sense to me that we can't ask a question, because I feel like if you change one form of government, you change your whole charter. That's just, because it just doesn't, it wouldn't read the same way, line for line. And I don't see citizens being able that watch this casually to parse out the differences in between as order for that to happen. So I just don't know how that works logistically, and so maybe that's something we need to add to the training part on how that would work, because I just don't see that as a amenable way to give it to the people, because basically you would have 3 options that would be on any given charter amendment, on any given ballot, because you'll have the existing charter that says that we'll continue this way from 1982 if these motions fail, the change in government plus all of the charter that's connected to that, the other change in government with just tweaks to the current system that we have as a third thing in the way that this is laid out. And so if it's hard for me to explain that as we're sitting here, it may be very difficult to explain to somebody who is a layperson that's doing that. So we're going to need not only some additional training, but I think we need to get this timeline question answered, because this all pushes it for 1 year. If the the true date is 2 years, then it makes a huge difference on what we're doing. Because this is only our 12th meeting, and we meet once a month. So this is basically a year in. So our thought process has been that we have 2 years left to do this instead of one. So anybody got any questions? Yep.
And this is a question just to once again get some clarity. So when the community was asked the question, would you want the 1982 charter to be revised, in which, you know, if the community was to say no, then that question would never, you know, that there would nothing to be executed, in which, you know, the community said no. Would we be able to ask the community, would they be interested in the city manager on the ballot? Would you be interested in the city manager government in the ballot to, you know, I guess, and we might have already answered this question, but, you know, how it was asked, do we want to revise the charter? Would you like to see a city manager government in Pontiac? In which case, I feel like we would get a better answer if they were to say, you know, if the community was to say, yes, we would like a city manager government, and which then on the next ballot, we could introduce how that would fit in the proposal. Or you know, or if the community, you know, votes no, they would not want to see the city management, then we would simply move on with the strong form of government writing out the charter commission like that.
Yeah, I think that's what we were trying to ask, and what I'm hearing is when we present whatever the question would be, if we pass, so if the citizen said, let's stick with strong mayor because that's what we know. If we put a question on that said that do the citizens want a strong mayor form of government, and they say yes with the charter amended, we would also have to have those amendments at the same time, because I guess if we don't do it in that form, according to the recommendation of the clerk, and that's why we got to do some research on this, we would not be able to implement the changes that come with city manager, because we would be answering that question, but they would not have had the whole package in front of them at the time that the question was there. So we would literally have to ask them, do you want a city manager form of government? The people would say yes, but that does nothing. Then we would have to present a charter with the city manager and say, do you accept this charter? And then that would be the vote, and that would be a different problem, because if that doesn't happen, then you don't have anything, and it revotes back to 1982. So the way it's set up could potentially be super messy, and we need to find a way to simplify the process, because I don't even know if that is something that as a board we even want to do. So we might be having a moot point at this point, but we did agree when we went through our committees that we were going to go through the current charter. And so I think that not only getting the training, but also finding out what the posts of the actual charter commissioners are on particular issues is going to be very helpful to go down that route. You get what I'm saying? Like, yeah. So I think two things have to happen. One, we have to find out what the true timeline is, and then we need to let the citizens know that piece. I think that needs to probably be our first informational, that we come out with a community that we have until X date to get this on the ballot. And these are the things that could potentially change in a charter one way or another as a communication piece. And then I think the second part is going through and really talking about, because what we laid out was we were going to go through at our next meeting of the whole, actually going through what our charter says about our incorporation as a city and what kind of government we have with the current charter as a baseline. So we planned on doing the educational sessions first, but this moves up the timeline in a way that we may not be able to do all the things we want to do as far as rolling out the education. So I don't want to belabor that. I just want to make sure. Yeah, go ahead.
So the charter amendments to the existing charter and the governance issues have to be on the same ballot. I'm not sure, and that's something I can ask the clerk, whether or not, I mean, if you decide to have that governance issue on the ballot, I'm not sure that you have to have the amendments for that particular issue on the ballot as well. I can ask for that, I can ask for clarity on that. And the true date, according to the clerk, is next year. It is 2024.
Yeah, no, what I'm saying is, we need to see the documentation so we can send that out to the citizens. That's the key component.
The wording, the true date, I just want to,
Yeah, so,
according to the clerk, the true date is 2024.
yeah, I just need to see that in writing, and then the section of,
I will ask.
whatever that is.
I will ask him
So,
to get that for you as well.
the one thing that I had to learn when I was sitting up here is hearsay is not a way to govern. So I had to make sure that we had the sections in order to be able to articulate that to the citizens, because we need to be posting that in different places so people will know what that timeline is, so they know why we're moving. Because we made some promises as this commission came on, that one of our key things was going to be making sure that the citizens were informed every step of the way. And so if you're telling us we need to move our plan up by a year, we need to be able to articulate why we're moving it up a year and why they didn't know about that ahead of time. So that's a big step for us, just from a communication piece. But I also need to find out, and that second question is that, because it doesn't make sense if you're not changing the form of government to make a whole lot of amendments to the current structure of government if it's not changing. So creating a charter saying that, okay, you would have a fire department that was governed by public safety and blah, 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 in the meeting of the 5-person commission board versus having 7 city council people and a mayor, those are huge different steps and very nuanced in a way that if we're able to ask a question first and then get a vote from the community, then that makes our job so much easier to move to other things. If people say, we like the form of government that we have right now, we just want to make it better, then that's a different model than the general public saying to us and the voting public saying to us, we want to change the direction of the form of government we have. Then we have to do a whole different, not only education strategy, but work plan in order to make that happen. So if we can do that, because I feel like we could really have a special election to get that question on as soon as possible, whatever it would be. So then we could go to the community and say, the voters said we wanted to change, or we want to stick with A, strong mayor form of government is the way to go, city manager is the way to go. Now we need to make the best charter that has that in it. That helps me out tremendously. If we not able to do that, and we have to come up with basically 2 competing charters to answer those questions and then vote on it, that's a lot of extra work that may not be feasible in a year timeline. So I just want to put that out there. Anybody else got any questions? So our next meeting is June 22nd, June 22nd, June 22nd, June 22nd at 6 o'clock in the City Council chambers. Our next meeting is June 22nd at 6 p.m. in the City Council chambers. If you have a charter commissioner that is your designated buddy, make sure you text them and tell them our next meeting is June 22nd at 6 p.m. So I will, we had public comments that were unofficial, but we didn't have anybody that was signed up before 6 o'clock. So we're going to move to closing comments from Commissioner Killian, and then we'll go from there. So, bless you.
Hold on, I gotta gather my thoughts. Wow. We just assimilated a lot. My closing comments, outreach department, we have a lot of work to do. It seems to be that, because I was totally confused and unconfused and back confused about this whole translation of this timeline and everything about far as how it's going to be presented, far as on the ballot, what can be and what cannot be. But that, again, that's what we signed up for. That's something this Charter Commission has the task of getting together and understanding how to put this on the ballot and correctly. It is strictly up to the public. So that's what, like I said, again, that's going to put a lot of emphasis on the outreach committee to get this information out, which we're able to pretty take upon. But again, it puts a lot of emphasis on we need public participation. Without that, our job is nothing. And I want to say that, you know, from my bottom of my heart to my mother's heart to my father's heart, to put their soul in this city. If we want to move forward, we have to, you know, truly understand and understand the rules and regulations of what's going on, and definitely transparency and communication. And with that said, I bid adieu.
All right. Thank you, and I will give my closing comments. I appreciate Mr. Rick David and Ms. Veronica Taylor for coming down to the meeting today. I did take advantage, and I will reach out to the Federal Reserve, Mr. David, on your behest. I do want to just push back on the fact that you said Pontiac is not welcoming to people who are not here. We are Pontiac. And the fact that we're Pontiac, we have the ability to change whatever we've done in the past to move forward and doing things in a new and opening way. And so we can't look at what has been past practices and past bad behavior of a city. We have not only new industry, we have new people coming in every day. We got poodles on the east side now, so times have definitely changed. So we need to make sure that we're not doing a disservice to casting the narrative that we want in the community. In 2012, it said one of the things that we needed to work on was the imaging of the city. And our words have tremendous power. And so I want to make sure that everybody who's listening, even if they're not working on this charter, is always choosing to speak life rather than death. And so with that, I will adjourn this meeting at 7:03.
We didn't need a motion to close.